seeking the lost, yes, kindly entreating, wanderers on the mountain astray. Come unto me, his message repeating, words of the Master speaking today. Going afar upon the mountain.
Good evening, everyone. Since I was put on the spot to share something about myself, I was not prepared for that. I didn't know, but you should always come prepared, right? I'm trying to think of what can I share with you. And one thing that pops in my mind is a little bit of how I grew up and how I got where I am today. First of all, it is only by the grace of God. Amen? Amen. It is only by the grace of God. So I grew up in a, let's put it this way, in a single home with a single mother, and did not have a father figure around, and grew up as the only child. My mother wasn't always around for me. She was a very busy lady, traveling and doing other things. And I always wanted a mother figure. I always wanted the love of a mother, which I never really received when I was a little boy growing up. So I really looked for that as I started to get older in, let's just put it this way, the wrong way. I'm not going to go into details. I did not grow up Adventist, by the way. I grew up Roman Catholic. I wasn't always a Seventh Adventist, but I was very familiar with the Adventist faith. I loved everything about Adventism, their manner, the way they dress, you know, their diet, and all of that. I remember as a child growing up, the only thing I did not like about Adventists was the Sabbath. I did not like the idea of going to church on the Sabbath, especially growing up Catholic. And to me, that was a no-no. And I used to play soccer, which probably you call it football here. And I was very big on that. And Saturday, that's when we would go play football or soccer. And other sports, I was very into sports. And that was one of my passions. I had three passions as a young man, as a child growing up. I had three passions. Number one was to become a football player, a professional football player. Number two was to become a movie star. That was my second passion. And my third passion, which was not on top of the list, it wasn't really a passion. This was just something that I have said to myself, that I have said that if I ever become a Christian, I would want to be a pastor. I was very young when I said that, but that was not really what I wanted to do. I just said that because I thought maybe, you know, it would be a good thing to be able to travel throughout the world and preach the gospel. But my number one passion was soccer, was football, to become a professional football player. And then, as I mentioned, the second one was to become a movie star. And I came very close to become a professional soccer player. One time I was playing, I used to play in different tournaments, and this guy was standing on the sideline and he was observing me. And I was about, I believe, 18, 19 years old around that time. And then he approached me and then he said, how would you like to play for this professional team, this other professional team? I don't know, for some reason I got so scared and I started thinking about my mother and I turned it down. Long story short, later, a few years later, and I started to maybe considering being in the movie industry. because I had at that time, I had more of a passion for the movie industry than for football. So I went and got an agent. I was living in New York City at the time. And I went and got an agent, and he auditioned me for, well, no, he sent me. How many of you have heard Saturday Night Live? This is a show in New York City. It's called Saturday Night Live. You're not familiar with that? It comes on every Saturday evening, and it's a big show. All the big stars are involved in that show. They made appearances in that show, and I auditioned for that. I went for an audition, and I passed the audition. And now, the next season was coming, and I was supposed to be the next cast for Saturday Night Live. And while I was waiting for that, and I got a call one evening, I should say. I wasn't home, but they left a message on my answering machine. They said that they found a part for me in a movie. I was going to play the role of a patient on a hospital bed. On a hospital bed. And so that was one thing after another. Then, have you heard of the Star Wars movies? I auditioned for that, the first one. I auditioned for that. So that was my passion. I wanted to get into that business. But again, long story short, I even did some modeling as well. I was in the modeling industry as well. But the Lord would not allow me to advance, to go any further. He just blocked the ways. And who knows where I would be today if God did not block me from becoming famous. And that was my passion. I mean, I was so passionate about movies. When a movie comes out, especially if it's a movie that I'm very interested in, I can tell you everything about the movie. Who played in that movie, the actor or actors, supporting actors, actresses, the company who makes the movie. I could tell you everything about it. Everything about the movie. That was my passion along with soccer. So those two things didn't happen. God stopped them. But remember, I mentioned I grew up Catholic, and I also had Adventist influence around me as a child growing up. Like one thing they used to do, they used to send missionaries to our neighborhood at that time, and they will gather the young children, including myself, and they will teach us. This would take place on Friday afternoon before sundown. They would teach us some songs, Bible songs in different languages, and I still remember some of them. But I liked all of that, but I did not like going to church on Saturday. Did not like that. Plus, growing up Catholic, it's very convenient, the Mass, and on Sunday morning, if you miss the 5 o'clock Mass, you can catch up with the 6 o'clock Mass, or the 7 o'clock Mass, or the 8 o'clock, and it goes on and on and on. It's only 45 minutes in and out, and you're done. But Protestant churches, I did not like them. I thought their services were way too long. Did not like Protestant churches, especially Seventh-day Adventists, because of Saturday. I did not like that. And plus, in the Catholic Church, I go to church, 45 minutes, I'm done, then I'm free for the rest of the day. I'm free to go and do whatever I want to do, especially playing football. So, but for some reason, I could not get away from Seventh-day Adventists. Then my mother became a Seventh-day Adventist. She was not an Adventist, she became an Adventist. And she got married into the church. And I said, okay, there you go again. Here comes the Seventh-day Adventist again. So, out of respect for her, I would sometimes go to church with her. Then I started dating somebody. While I was going there, I started dating somebody from the church. I said, here we go again. Adventist. Then, when I moved to New York, I started dating somebody else again. who was an Adventist. And I'm like, well, more Adventists again. So finally, by that time, I truly believed that the Lord was speaking to my heart. Because one of the things that I started to feel convicted about around that time was my health. Although I thought my health was great, but my diet was very awful. My diet, I had meat in the morning, meat in the afternoon, and meat in the evening. It was very awful. I was working as an assistant manager back in New York, Brooklyn, New York. And next to my job was an Asian restaurant. And they had some really good pork chop there. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. And I used to have that 2 times a day. Boy, looking back, I'm like, wow, I used to eat that stuff. So anyway, I used to go there all the time. I mean, mine, it was good. But that's the reason why I believe that God was calling me around that time to make a lifestyle change. And so I joined the church. By the way, when I joined the Adventist church, they gave me no Bible study. 0. I knew nothing except things that I've heard about Adventism. But nothing. Nobody took the time to explain to me about the state of the dead, about the mark of the beast, and many fundamental beliefs of Seventh-day Adventists. Nobody explained anything like that to me. They just baptized me into the church. Because by the time I joined the church, it was about the numbers. It was not about qualities. You see? It was about the numbers, not about qualities. And I struggled with the Sabbath. After I got baptized into the church, I struggled with the Sabbath. I didn't have any problem with anything else. I gave up the unclean food. No problem. I used to wear jewelry. I gave that up. No problem. And many other things. Even though nobody explained them to me, but I realized that's what the church believed. That's part of their teaching, so I gave that up. But the Sabbath, I struggled with that. So I wanted to give up, but the Lord kept me there, and I studied for myself for almost 2 years. For almost 2 years, I studied on my own and watched a lot of sermons as well. And the Lord, towards the end of that 2 years, the Lord opened my eyes. I felt like I had the experience of the Apostle Paul. Scales fell off my eyes, and I was able to see. Now, I was a very, very, very shy person. You would pay me $1 billion to stand in front of a crowd like this one right now. I would not do it, because I would see you guys as a bunch of lions getting ready to jump on me. And I would be shaking like a leaf. Standing in front of a group of people, no, not me. That's not me. I would not do it. But at the end of that, or towards the end of that 2 years, after the Lord opened my eyes spiritually and helped me to see, all of a sudden, I was not shy anymore. I would go to my job and start witnessing to my coworkers and started telling them about the Sabbath. Now, by that time, I had been an Adventist for 2 years already. Now, it was as if I just became an Adventist and I was sharing my faith with people now. And I went to my church at the time and I asked them if I could preach. I would like to preach. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not shy anymore. So they said, okay, we'll see. We'll schedule you. And then they let me preach for, I think on 2 occasions. They let me preach. Now, it was around that same time that the Lord led me to witness to a Baptist minister about the Sabbath. And then he accepted the Sabbath. And then he wanted me to study with his family. Now, I was still a brand new Adventist. Now, the Lord led me to minister to that Baptist pastor. And he accepted the Sabbath. Now, he's asking me to study with his family. Well, you know, to God be the glory. You know what Philippians 4:13 says, right? I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. And the Lord empowered me to study with his family. He joined the church. His son, who was an adult, he also joined the church, got baptized there, his wife, and then his son's wife, and then it was a domino effect. And many of them, as a matter of fact, he was on 3ABN, that pastor. He was on 3ABN giving his testimony, how he became a Seventh-day Adventist. And so it was around that time after he accepted the Sabbath message and joined the church. Then again, I remember the third passion. What was it again? To become a pastor. That's when it takes me back to, well, yeah, I remember that I did say, if I ever become a Christian, I would want to be a pastor. And then that's when the Lord put this burden in my heart to go for it. That's when I felt the call to go for it. But I said, okay, where should I go? I didn't have much money. But again, long story short, the Lord did not forget what I had said when I was a child. If I ever become a Christian, I would want to be a pastor. The Lord did not forget, though I had forgotten about that, but not God. He did not forget. And so, remember, I also mentioned part of me being a pastor when I was a child, the dream there was to travel the world, to be able to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to many places. Well, even after I became a pastor and I started Amazing Word Ministries, and by the way, if you read what Amazing Word Ministries subtitle says, you know what the subtitle says? Going around the world to help prepare a people for the imminent return of Jesus Christ. Now, I put those subtitles there years ago, but never really dreamed of that I would eventually being called to travel around the world to help to play a small, very small part in finish the work that God has entrusted unto us. And one last thing I would share here is that as I was going to theological school, some said, "You will never be qualified as a preacher." I don't know if they remember that. They said, "You will never be qualified as a preacher. You cannot preach." Because by that time, I was still kind of shy about preaching. I was still kind of, part of me was still kind of afraid of crowds. You see, if I were to stand in front of the crowds, even though I would prepare a sermon, then all of a sudden I'm forgetting a lot of things around that time. So they thought that, oh, you'll never make it. But, you know, what does the Bible say? With God, all things are what? Are possible. So it is only by the grace of God that I am standing before you today. Even when I started this ministry, most people did not give me the benefits of the doubt. They thought that this was just something that I'm doing to get attention. They thought that, yeah, you're not going to go anywhere with this. But God had the last saying on this, right? Amen? God had the last saying. So this is just a little bit of myself, what God has done, and I give him all the honor and glory for this. Amen?
Thus would I go on missions of mercy, following Christ from day unto day, cheering the faint and raising the fallen, pointing the lost to Jesus the way, going afar.